Stop the car. The little girl's voice cut through the late afternoon traffic so sharply that even the horn behind them seemed to fall silent for half a second. On the edge of downtown Atlanta, where polished glass towers gave way to older brick buildings and crowded bus stops, Elias Whitmore sat in the back seat of a black town car, barely looking up from the contract glowing on his tablet. At 46, he had the stillness of a man used to being obeyed. His silver watch caught the sun. His tie was straight. His face was calm in the expensive, distant way that made strangers step aside before he even spoke. The car had paused at a red light near a pharmacy and a diner with a buzzing neon sign, and outside the passenger side window stood a little black girl, maybe 8 years old, with 2 neat braids and a faded yellow backpack hanging from one shoulder. She had been selling wrapped caramel candies from a paper box, moving from one line of cars to the next with careful manners and tired shoes. Most drivers waved her away. One looked through her like she was invisible. But when her eyes landed on the Whitmore car, she stopped moving. Something in her face changed. She stepped closer to the glass and stared at the front wheel, then up at the driver, then at the man in the back seat. "Stop the car," she shouted again, louder now, one small hand lifted as if she could physically hold the vehicle in place. The driver, Marvin, flinched in annoyance and reached toward the window controls. "Sir, I can make her move," he said, his voice clipped, already half turning. Elias did not even glance outside. "We are late," he replied. "Go when the light changes." The girl shook her head so hard that one braid slapped her cheek. "No, sir," she cried, now speaking straight to the tinted glass as though she knew the man behind it could hear every word. "Do not let him drive that car." That finally pulled Elias's eyes from the tablet. He looked up, saw the child framed by sunlight and exhaust, and frowned. Her expression was not playful, not begging, not wild. It was focused, urgent, frighteningly certain. The light turned green. Cars behind them began to honk. Marvin's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "She is just a street kid trying to cause a scene," he muttered. But before Elias could dismiss her, the girl pointed downward, not at the windshield, not at the hood, but low and exact, toward the front passenger side. "The shiny line is dripping," she said. "It was not dripping before. A man in a gray jacket was under your car. Then he ran when I yelled." The words hit the air with the weight of something too specific to ignore. Elias leaned slightly toward the window at last. He could not see the wheel from his angle, only the fierce set of the girl's jaw and the tremble in her fingers as she pointed. A city bus groaned past in the next lane. Somewhere a siren wailed far off. The people on the sidewalk had started watching. Marvin gave a short laugh that sounded forced. "Brake fluid could look like water from the air conditioner," he said quickly. "This happens all the time." "Then why were you staring in your mirror before she came up?" the girl asked. The question landed harder than her warning. Elias's eyes lifted slowly from the child to his driver. For the first time, Marvin looked back too fast. It was a tiny thing, barely a flicker, but men like Elias built fortunes by noticing flickers. He lowered the tablet onto the leather seat beside him. The green light was gone now, replaced by another red as traffic shifted around them in irritated streams. "Step out of the car," Elias said quietly. Marvin turned halfway around. "Sir." Now, the little girl had not moved. Her chest rose and fell in quick breaths, but she stood her ground between the town car and the noise of the city, as if whatever she had seen mattered more to her than the danger of being wrong. Elias opened his own door and stepped onto the street, expensive shoes meeting cracked pavement, his world of schedules and polished boardrooms colliding in one jarring instant with a child carrying candy in a paper box and a warning no one else had been willing to hear. Heat rolled off the pavement in soft waves as Elias circled toward the front passenger side, and for a moment the city felt unnaturally loud, every horn and engine pushing against the silence growing inside his chest. Nia stayed near the curb, clutching her paper candy box against her faded t-shirt, watching not like a frightened child, but like a witness waiting to see if an adult would finally believe what she had seen. Marvin stepped out more slowly than Elias had expected, smoothing his jacket with careful hands. "Sir, with respect, this is becoming public," he said under his breath, glancing at the gathering eyes on the sidewalk. "We should not let a child from the street embarrass you over a puddle." Elias did not answer. He crouched just enough to see beneath the polished body of the town car, And there it was, a thin, wet line catching the red traffic light like a strip of metal. Not water. Too slick. Too deliberate. He straightened at once. "Do not touch the car," he said. His voice was still calm, but now it had the edge that made boardrooms go quiet. Marvin froze. Nia took one small step closer. "It started after that man slid out from under there," she said. "He wore work gloves, but his shoes were clean. Real clean. Like he did not really fix cars." Elias looked at her fully for the first time. She was observant in a way that unsettled him. Children usually noticed color, noise, friendliness. This one noticed details that belonged in depositions and security reports. "Did you see his face?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only the side. He kept his cap low." Elias reached into his jacket for his phone, then stopped when Marvin spoke too quickly. "I can call maintenance from the garage, sir. No need for police. If the line cracked, that is mechanical, not criminal." The wording was wrong. Too prepared. Elias let the pause stretch. "Interesting choice of words," he said. "I did not say police." Marvin's mouth closed. Across the street, a delivery truck rumbled past, and the smell of hot bread drifted briefly from the diner before Diesel swallowed it again. Nia pointed down the block. "He ran that way," she said. "Past the pharmacy, then behind the church parking lot." Elias followed her finger. A gray awning. A side alley. A narrow gap where anyone could vanish in seconds. He should have stayed with the car. He knew that. He should have called his chief of security, let professionals sweep the area, and moved on to the next controlled room in his controlled life. Instead, he did something impulsive, something his board would have laughed at if they had seen it. He handed Nia his phone. "Call 911, he said. "Tell them there may be tampering with a vehicle at Peachtree and Linden. Put it on speaker." Marvin looked stunned. "Sir, you are trusting her?" "At the moment," Elias said. "She is the only person here who noticed the truth before it became expensive." Nia held the phone like it was made of glass. Her fingers were small against the black case, but her voice came out steady when the dispatcher answered. She gave the corner clearly, then looked up at Elias for permission before adding, "And maybe send somebody fast, because if that car had gone downhill, something bad could have happened." Elias watched her say it without drama, without tears, without trying to make herself the center of the moment. When the call ended, he took the phone back, but not before noticing the scrape on her backpack strap, the frayed seam repaired by hand, the care in the repair. A life held together with effort. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nia Brooks." "Are your parents nearby, Nia?" Her eyes shifted for the first time. "My grandma is at the bus stop around the corner," she said. "She thinks I am selling one more row of candies." Marvin took a step back as a patrol car siren began to rise in the distance, faint but coming closer. Elias heard it too, and with it came another realization, colder than the first. If someone had tampered with the car and Marvin was nervous before Nia ever approached, then this was not random. Someone had expected him to get in, sit back, and trust the system built around him. He turned to his driver. "You are not leaving," he said. Then he looked at Nia again, and his voice softened by a fraction. "And neither are you. Not until you tell me everything you saw." The first patrol car slid to the curb with lights flashing blue across store windows and chrome, turning the intersection into something colder, sharper, more public than any of them wanted. Nia instinctively stepped back, her sneakers brushing the curb, and Elias noticed it at once. He had spent years in rooms where authority moved toward him with handshakes and practiced smiles. He had almost forgotten what flashing lights looked like to a child selling candy on a city sidewalk. So before the officers even got out, he moved one step to the side, enough to place himself between Nia and the street without touching her, a quiet correction she seemed to register with a surprised blink. Officer Lena Ruiz approached first, one hand near her radio, her tone professional and measured. "Who made the call?" Nia opened her mouth, but Marvin spoke over her. "The child did, officer. She may have misunderstood what she saw." Elias turned his head slowly. "I told her to call," he said. "And she may be the reason none of us are discussing this from a hospital waiting room." The officer's attention shifted immediately. Another officer crouched near the front wheel while Ruiz listened as Elias summarized the leak and the witness account. Nia stood straighter as she spoke, giving the same details without embellishment. Gray jacket, work gloves, clean shoes, cap low, quick exit behind the church lot. Officer Ruiz nodded once. "Good eyes," she said. It was a small sentence, but Nia's shoulders changed under it, as though somebody had replaced a weight with air. Marvin kept insisting it could still be harmless mechanical failure, yet every word now sounded less like caution and more like defense. Then the second officer rose from the front wheel and looked toward Ruiz. "Line does not look naturally worn," he said. "Could be cut. We need a tow and a closer inspection." No one said anything for a beat. Traffic hissed past. Somewhere nearby, church bells struck the quarter hour. Marvin's face lost color. Elias did not look at him first. He looked at Nia. She had not smiled. She had not celebrated being right. She only hugged her candy box tighter, as if truth was not a victory where she came from, only a burden someone had to carry until adults caught up. Officer Ruiz asked, "Miss Brooks, can you show us exactly where the man ran?" Nia hesitated, then glanced at the corner. "My grandma is waiting." It was the first time she sounded her age. Elias answered before the officer could. "We get your grandmother first." Nia looked at him again, cautious but studying him now the way he had studied balance sheets all his life, looking for what was hidden under polished surfaces. "You do not have to do that," she said softly. "Yes," Elias replied, "I do." They rounded the pharmacy corner together, with Officer Ruiz beside them and Marvin left near the car with the second officer. At the bus stop sat an elderly black woman in a church hat and pale blue cardigan, one grocery bag at her feet, scanning the sidewalk with rising worry. The moment she saw Nia walking beside police and a man in a tailored suit, she stood so fast the bag tipped over, rolling an orange into the gutter. "Nia Elise Brooks," she said, fear and pride colliding in the same breath. Nia hurried forward. "Grandma, I am okay." Elias bent first, catching the orange before it reached the storm drain. It was such a small act that he almost did not notice himself doing it. He handed it back to the woman. "Ma'am," he said, "your granddaughter may have just prevented a serious accident." Grandma Brooks stared at him, then at the officers, then down at Nia's face. "What did you see, baby?" she asked. Nia answered plainly. No drama, no trembling, just the truth. By the time she finished, Officer Ruiz's radio crackled with an update from the car. A maintenance tag had been found lodged above the wheel well, too clean to belong there, with a private garage code printed on it. Elias knew that code. It belonged to the secure parking level beneath his own office tower. The distance between sidewalk and skyline collapsed inside him all at once. Whoever had set this in motion had not chosen him by chance. And for the first time that day, the warning in Nia's voice reached deeper than the car. It reached his life. The late afternoon heat sat low over Peachtree Street, and the blue lights from the patrol cars kept washing over the curb in slow, silent pulses. A tow truck rolled to a stop behind the town car, its metal chains clinking softly, and that small sound seemed to confirm that the day had crossed a line no one could uncross. Elias kept his eyes on the maintenance tag inside the evidence bag, while Officer Lena Ruiz spoke in a calm, steady voice beside him. She told him the vehicle would be taken for a full inspection and that no one, especially not the driver, would be allowed near it until the brake line and undercarriage had been photographed and logged. Nia stood close to her grandmother near the bus stop sign, her candy box resting against her knees, watching the adults move as if they had entered a world she had touched but did not belong to. When Officer Ruiz asked whether she would repeat what she saw one more time for the written report, Nia answered just as clearly as before. She said the man in the gray jacket had crouched low under the front side of the car, and she remembered the way he slid out quickly when a delivery truck turned the corner. She also said Marvin had been looking in his mirror before she walked up, like he was checking something behind him. That detail shifted the air at once. Marvin, standing several feet away with another officer, lifted his chin and said he checked his mirrors all the time because it was his job. Nobody argued, but nobody moved to defend him either. Elias looked at the driver then, not with anger, but with the cold attention of a man rearranging every assumption he had made that morning. It was not the kind of look Marvin could brush off. Grandma Brooks placed one hand on Nia's shoulder, gentle and proud at the same time, and asked if they were free to go home. Officer Ruiz said almost, then turned back to Elias because a new question had just opened. If the tag came from the private garage beneath his own tower, then someone with access had either entered the car there or wanted the investigation to point there. Elias understood the difference immediately. One meant betrayal inside his business. The other meant someone was planting a false trail close enough to sting. He asked who would have access to that level beyond executives and registered staff. He answered himself before Ruiz could. Cleaning contractors, security rotations, private drivers waiting in the lower lane, maintenance vendors. More people than he liked. More people than he had ever truly seen. Then Nia tugged once at her grandmother's sleeve and spoke toward Officer Ruiz instead of Elias. She said she remembered one more thing. The gray jacket had a stitched patch near the shoulder, red and white, like a little wing or arrow. Ruiz knelt to her level and asked if she was sure. Nia nodded. She had noticed it because it flashed when he scooted out from under the car. Elias closed his hand around nothing, as if trying to hold that image still. A wing patch. A service mark, maybe. A vendor uniform. Suddenly, the hidden tag no longer felt like the only clue. Ruiz stood and told another officer to start checking contractor rosters tied to the underground garage. This time, the change came from Nia, not the people with badges or money. The city noise carried on around them, but in the space beside the bus stop, the investigation had just turned from accident prevention into a search for someone who had walked through Elias Whitmore's own doors. Rubber soles scraped lightly against the sidewalk as an officer hurried back from the patrol car with a tablet in hand. The sun had dropped behind the glass towers enough to turn every window bronze, and in that dimmer light the tension around the bus stop sharpened instead of fading. Officer Ruiz studied the screen, then asked Elias for the names of the vendors cleared for the private garage beneath his building. He listed the largest ones first, but when she read out a smaller subcontractor called Red Arrow Mechanical, Nia looked up at once. She did not interrupt right away. She just stared at the words on the tablet like she was trying to match sound to memory. Then she said the patch might have looked like that, like an arrow with little wings. Ruiz and Elias traded one fast, sober glance. The company name did not prove anything, but it gave shape to the clue. Elias said Red Arrow handled after-hours ventilation service on several lower levels because they were cheaper than the national firms. Saying it aloud seemed to disturb him. He had spent years making billion-dollar decisions, yet the opening in his life that afternoon might have come through the smallest cost-cutting line on a facilities report. Ruiz asked whether he could call building security and freeze all contractor exit logs before anyone left or records disappeared. This time Elias did not hesitate. He stepped away from the curb, took out his phone, and used the voice that made people in boardrooms stop talking. He ordered the tower's head of security to lock down digital entry records for the underground garage, hold all vendor sign-out sheets, and prevent any files from being altered until police arrived. It was the first time since Nia called out that he was not merely reacting. He was sealing his own world before it could clean itself. Across the curb, Marvin shifted his weight and asked if he could leave after giving his statement because he had done nothing wrong. Ruiz told him politely that he would stay until she was finished. His jaw tightened. Nia noticed it, and so did Elias. A little earlier, Elias might have ignored that expression. Now he watched every flinch. Grandma Brooks whispered that they needed to catch their bus before dark, and the practical truth of that landed hard. Nia had done what grown people in suits had failed to do, yet she and her grandmother were still measuring the evening by bus schedules and grocery money. Elias walked back toward them and crouched enough to speak respectfully, without towering over her. He thanked Nia again, but this time his voice changed. It carried more than gratitude. It carried recognition. He asked Grandma Brooks if he could have his assistant drive them home later after police finished, just to make sure they got back safely. Grandma Brooks hesitated, not from fear, but from dignity. She said they were managing fine. Before Elias could answer, Ruiz received a message through her earpiece and lifted one hand for silence. A preliminary traffic camera pull from the corner had caught part of the block 15 minutes before Elias reached the car. The angle was poor, but it did show a service van idling half a block down with a partial logo on the side. Red, white, arrow-shaped. For the first time, the clue no longer belonged only to memory. It had entered the record, and once it did, the distance between a little girl on the sidewalk and the machinery of a powerful man's hidden enemies became dangerously small. Diesel from the departing tow truck lingered in the air while the first edge of evening settled over the intersection. Somewhere farther down the block, a bus exhaled at the curb, and Grandma Brooks turned her head toward the sound out of habit, the way people do when public time matters more than personal drama. Officer Ruiz was still listening to dispatch when another officer approached her with a quiet update from the traffic division. The service van from the camera clip had not only been near the block. License plate readers caught it entering the downtown zone less than an hour after logging out of a contractor gate linked to Elias Whitmore's tower. Ruiz's expression tightened in the careful way professionals do when a suspicion becomes a line of evidence. Elias heard enough to understand that the circle around him was closing. He asked whether the plate matched an active company vehicle. Ruiz said yes, but the name attached to the checkout record was not a mechanic. It was a temporary access escort signed in by Building Transport Services. That department sat much closer to drivers and executive movement than to ventilation repairs. The meaning landed between Elias and Marvin before either man spoke. Marvin did not step back, but his shoulders lost their confidence. He said plenty of vehicles came and went through that garage, and that escort paperwork could be wrong. He was not protesting innocence anymore. He was arguing possibility. Elias moved toward him with the measured control of a man refusing to explode in public. He asked one direct question. Had Marvin ever arranged after-hours access for outside crews without clearing it through the office manager? Marvin said no. The answer came too fast. Officer Ruiz noticed it as well. She did not accuse him. She simply asked for his phone. Marvin stared at her for a second too long, then handed it over. That surrender changed the balance of the sidewalk more than any raised voice could have. Nia watched from beside her grandmother, not frightened, only alert, as if she understood that adults often tell the truth in pieces and that the pieces never fall at once. Then the break came from somewhere no one expected. Elias's own phone buzzed. The head of tower security reported that one access record had already been remotely edited 15 minutes earlier, just before the police freeze order took effect. The deleted field was the escort approver's name. But the system had preserved one thing in the audit trail. The edit request came from an executive assistant terminal on the 38th floor, 2 levels below Elias's office. Not the garage, not a contractor van, inside the tower, but higher than transport and lower than the boardroom. Someone had noticed the alarm spreading and tried to erase a bridge before police crossed it. Elias looked toward the skyline, every window now holding the last gold of the day, and understood that the attack had not begun in the street. The street was only where it nearly succeeded. Beside him, Nia shifted her candy box from one arm to the other, and that tiny practical movement brought him back down from the glass towers to the cracked curb where all of this had truly changed. He turned to Grandma Brooks and said they were not taking the bus. Not tonight. This was no longer only about getting statements and going home. Whoever had reached into his world had also seen an 8-year-old witness see too much. Officer Ruiz agreed before Grandma Brooks could answer. She said she wanted them moved somewhere safe while detectives pulled the building records. For the first time since Nia spoke up, the danger widened beyond the car and settled clearly around the people who had stopped it. Blue strobes rippled across the glass windows on Peachtree Street, washing the sidewalk in quiet flashes while traffic hissed through the damp Atlanta night. The smell of rain on hot concrete mixed with burned coffee from a closing cart nearby, and that ordinary city scent made everything feel stranger, not safer. Nia stood close to Grandma Brooks, her candy bag pressed flat against her small coat, while Officer Lena Ruiz spoke in a low, steady voice with a detective who had just arrived. Elias Whitmore stayed a few feet away, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone without looking at it. For a man who seemed built from schedules and decisions, he had gone unusually still. Ruiz explained that detectives wanted Nia and her grandmother moved to a protected location for the night, somewhere off the obvious grid, while they pulled building access records and reviewed camera footage from the tower garage. Grandma Brooks did not like the idea of going anywhere with strangers, and it showed in the set of her jaw, but the officer did not rush her. She only said that whoever touched the car had already crossed one line, and they could not assume that would be the last one. Nia looked up at Elias then, studying him the way children studied adults when they were trying to decide if a promise meant anything. He surprised her by crouching slightly, so he did not tower over her. He told her she had done the right thing, and he said it without softness meant to flatter, only with plain truth. That mattered more. A second detective walked over carrying a clear evidence sleeve. Inside was a printed maintenance tag with the tower garage code and a partial work order number. Elias took one glance at it, and his face changed. The code was real. Not public, not something pulled from a random garage downtown. It belonged to the secure service level under Whitmore Tower, a place accessed by vetted crews and approved schedules. He asked who had touched the tag, and the detective answered that it had been photographed, bagged, and logged. Ruiz watched Elias carefully when she asked whether anyone on his executive staff had authority to release last-minute contractor access. He said yes, but only through a chain that left records. That answer should have sounded reassuring. Instead, it seemed to harden the air around them. Nia tugged on Grandma Brooks's sleeve and whispered that the man under the car had moved fast, like he already knew where to go when he slid out. Ruiz heard her and knelt. She asked Nia to think about the jacket again, not the man's face if she could not see it, but the shape, color, anything that stayed in her mind. Nia closed her eyes, hearing again the tiny scrape under the frame, seeing the fabric pull as the man rolled away. Then she opened them wide. There had been a patch on the shoulder, she said, red and white, maybe like a company sign stitched on. Ruiz and the detective traded a sharp look. A nearby patrol officer stepped in and reported that a service van had been flagged on traffic cameras 2 blocks west, parked too long near the curb before leaving the area. Red and white logo on the side. That was the moment the night shifted. The threat was no longer a shadow under one car. It had a route, a vehicle, and possibly a pass connected to Elias's own building. When Ruiz finally asked Grandma Brooks to come with her now, there was no more hesitation. Elias looked toward his sedan, then toward Nia, and understood with a cold clarity that the child who sold candy on a downtown sidewalk had become the one witness standing between an almost invisible crime and the people who arranged it. A siren faded into the distance, leaving behind the softer sounds that people noticed only when fear stopped shouting over them. Tires whispering on wet pavement, a helicopter far above Midtown, a radio crackling from a patrol cruiser at the curb. The city kept moving, but the knot around this one corner tightened. By the time Officer Ruiz guided Grandma Brooks and Nia into the back of an unmarked police sedan, Elias had already made 3 calls and trusted none of the answers. He had ordered all contractor access at Whitmore Tower frozen for the night, told building security to preserve every entry log, and instructed his chief of operations to lock the 38th floor terminals until detectives arrived. What he did not say on those calls mattered more than what he did. He did not mention Nia by name. He did not mention where police were taking her. He had learned enough in 1 hour to understand that information itself had become dangerous. The safe place turned out to be a quiet extended-stay suite used by the city for protected witnesses in lower-risk cases, tucked off a side road near a medical complex in Buckhead. Clean beige walls, humming air conditioner, 2 lamps, 1 table with a box of crackers and bottled water already set out. Nothing about it looked dramatic, and that plainness helped. Grandma Brooks sat near the door as if guarding it by instinct. Nia chose the armchair closest to the window, but did not pull the curtain. Ruiz remained with them while another officer waited outside. Elias arrived 10 minutes later with a paper bag from a late open diner, grilled cheese, fruit cups, and a small carton of milk because he had heard Grandma Brooks mention that Nia had skipped dinner. The gesture was awkward, almost formal, and because of that it felt honest. Nia accepted the milk with both hands. Then, while Ruiz reviewed the next steps, Elias's phone lit up with a secure message from his internal security lead. One contractor exit had appeared in the system at 6:42 p.m., approved retroactively, not live. The badge belonged to a company called Northline Facilities, and the approval had been entered from a terminal assigned to an executive assistant suite on the 38th floor. Elias read it twice. Ruiz asked to see the message, and his jaw tightened before he handed over the phone. She called it in immediately. A retroactive approval was not just sloppy bookkeeping. It suggested someone wanted the record to exist after the fact, neat enough to pass unless somebody looked closely. Grandma Brooks watched Elias while Ruiz spoke to dispatch. Men with his kind of money were usually easy to read in one way, she thought. They either made trouble louder or tried to buy silence. He did neither. Instead, he turned to Nia and asked if she would help one more time, only if she felt up to it. Nia nodded, chewing slowly on a corner of grilled cheese. Elias placed his phone on the table and showed her the Northline Facilities logo that his security lead had just pulled from vendor files. Red and white, split diagonally across a shoulder patch exactly the way she remembered it. Nia did not smile when she recognized it. She just touched the screen once and whispered, "That is it." Ruiz ended her call and delivered the next blow. The service van tied to Northline had not merely passed near the scene. It had entered the contractor lane beneath Whitmore Tower at 5:11 p.m. and exited at 6:44 p.m., 2 minutes after the retroactive approval was created. The room seemed to shrink around that timeline. Whoever arranged this had moved from Elias's building to his car in less than 2 hours, and someone inside had tried to erase the path just enough to hide it. For the first time that night, Elias looked less like a wealthy man under pressure and more like a man who had just realized his walls had been helping the wrong people in. The air conditioner clicked on with a dry hum, just as Officer Ruiz lowered her phone and looked across the room with the expression of someone deciding how much truth a child could carry at once. Outside the curtained window, Buckhead traffic thinned into a distant ribbon of light, and for the first time all evening, the danger felt less noisy and more deliberate. Nia sat with her knees tucked into the chair, milk carton empty, candy bag on her lap, like something familiar she could hold while adults traded facts that seemed too large for one night. Ruiz did not speak to her as if she were fragile. She said the company patch mattered because it turned a shadow into a direction. Then she asked whether Nia remembered anything else about the man in gray that did not seem important at the time. Grandma Brooks started to say that the child had done enough already, but Nia answered before the sentence finished. She remembered one more thing. Not about the man under the car this time, but about Marvin. Before she had stepped up to sell candy, he had checked his side mirror twice and looked back over his shoulder like he was waiting for someone to come around the corner. The room went still in a new way. Elias did not defend his driver. He only asked exactly when Nia had seen that. She told him it was before she spoke, before everyone looked under the car, when the street had still felt normal. Ruiz wrote it down immediately. That detail changed Marvin from a worried employee into a possible link between the street scene and whatever had started inside the tower. But the night did not give them long to sit with it. Elias's phone rang again, this time from building security downstairs at Whitmore Tower. A detective already on site had pulled camera footage from the contractor lane. The Northline van's plate was visible. So was the person who used the access kiosk to enter. Not the man in gray. A woman wearing a tower badge on a retractable clip, face partly turned, but recognizable enough for internal staff to identify. Elias listened without speaking, and the blood seemed to drain from his features one measured inch at a time. When he finally asked for the name, his voice was flat. Dana Mercer, senior executive assistant on the 38th floor. The same floor where the retroactive approval had been entered. Ruiz took the phone and asked the detective whether Mercer had exited with the van. The answer made the picture both clearer and worse. No. She badged the van in, then returned upstairs on camera through the staff elevator. Whoever came out later in the Northline vehicle was someone else. An insider had opened the gate, but the operative in gray had handled the street work. Nia did not understand corporate titles, but she understood betrayal when adults went quiet around it. Elias sat down for the first time since arriving. He stared at the table as though the clean wood surface had become a map of all the rooms he thought he controlled. Ruiz asked whether Mercer had authority over his calendar, travel changes, and vehicle movements. Elias answered yes. She often knew where he would be before some family members did. That was the next turn of the knife, not because it was dramatic, but because it was practical. Whoever had targeted the car may have known exactly when he planned to leave, which route he preferred, and when the vehicle would be parked outside long enough to reach. Nia spoke softly then, not to interrupt, but to place one small truth in the center of the grown-up wreckage. She said the bad people must have thought nobody would look down. Ruiz looked at her, then at Elias, and nodded once. An 8-year-old selling candy had looked where power had failed to look, and now the first inside name had finally come into the light. The suite in Buckhead grew quieter after that, but it was not the peace of safety. It was the hush that comes when every adult in the room understands the danger has changed shape. It was no longer only about a damaged car waiting at a curb in downtown Atlanta. It was about a person with a badge, a desk, and a reason. Officer Lena Ruiz stepped to the window with her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and steady as she requested a full pull of Dana Mercer's building access, phone location pings, and visitor logs from the 38th floor. Elias Whitmore remained near the dining table, one hand resting on the back of a chair, as though he needed something solid beneath his palm. The city lights reflected across the glass behind him, breaking his silhouette into hard silver lines. He had spent years building systems that rewarded precision, loyalty, and control. Tonight, an 8-year-old girl with a paper candy bag had shown him how easily all three could be borrowed by the wrong person. Nia sat beside Grandma Brooks on the sofa, her sneakers barely touching the carpet, watching the grown-ups move as if they were carrying invisible glass. She did not understand office politics or executive rank, but she understood the feeling in the room. Somebody had smiled in the daylight and hidden danger in the dark. Ruiz ended the call and turned back. Dana had not gone home. Her phone had stopped sharing location less than 20 minutes after the police request hit internal channels. That was not proof by itself, but in a night already full of bad coincidences, it landed like a match near dry paper. Elias lifted his eyes. He asked whether the request could have tipped her off. Ruiz answered honestly, yes, if the wrong person still had eyes inside the building. For the first time that night, Grandma Brooks spoke with a firmness that changed the room. She said then they had to assume the little girl had also been discussed somewhere she could not see. Silence followed. It was not dramatic. It was worse. It was practical. Elias looked at Nia, really looked at her, and whatever distance remained between billionaire and child seemed to fall away under the weight of plain responsibility. He said he wanted an unmarked transfer team outside the suite, not because he doubted the officers already assigned, but because too much had traveled too quickly through channels that were supposed to be secure. Ruiz gave him a measuring look, then nodded. That was not interference. That was someone finally understanding the scale of the breach. Nia glanced up at him and asked the question no one else had wanted to say aloud. If the lady in the building knew about the car, did that mean she knew about her too? Elias did not offer a polished lie. He crouched so he could answer at her height, his expensive coat folding against the rug. He told her they did not know that yet, and because they did not know, they were going to act carefully. Nia accepted that better than false comfort. She held her candy bag closer and thought for a moment. Then she said something small that shifted everything again. She said the man under the car had moved like he was in a hurry, but Marvin had not. Marvin had looked like a man waiting for a signal, not a surprise. Ruiz's eyes sharpened. That distinction mattered. One person had worked with his hands. Another may have worked with timing. Across the room, Elias straightened slowly, the answers settling into place not as proof, but as pattern. Dana Mercer could have opened the gate. The man in gray could have done the job. But Marvin, sitting in the driver's seat and checking his mirror before Nia ever spoke, might have been there to confirm whether Elias got into the car at the expected moment. The room changed again. This was no longer a single betrayal hidden in an office tower. It was coordination. And somewhere beyond the suite, beyond the guarded elevator and the buckhead lights, at least one of the people involved now knew the circle was tightening. Officer Lena Ruiz did not raise her voice. She did something that felt even heavier. She slid a legal pad across the coffee table, drew a simple line down the middle, and wrote 2 words at the top. Before. After. The suite was quiet except for the hush of the air conditioning and the faraway murmur of buckhead traffic below 30 floors of glass. Nia sat with both hands around a paper cup of warm cocoa, her small candy bag folded beside her like something from another life. Grandma Brooks watched from the sofa, one palm resting near Nia's shoulder, not touching unless the child asked for it. Ruiz turned the pad so Nia could see. You do not need to guess, she said gently. Just tell me what happened before you walked up to the car, and what happened after. That changed everything. Until then, the room had been chasing people. Now it was chasing timing. Nia looked down at the line on the page, then up at the city lights trembling in the window. She said Marvin had been sitting still, but not relaxed. He kept checking the driver's side mirror, then the rearview mirror, like he was waiting for something to enter the frame. Not looking at traffic, looking for a signal. Elias, standing near the wet bar with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled once at the wrist, did not interrupt. His face had taken on the hard stillness of a man learning which part of his life had been staged around him. Ruiz asked Nia what happened next. Nia said she had seen the shiny drip first, then remembered the man in the gray jacket low beside the car, then looked up and noticed Marvin's eyes flick toward the mirror again before she called out. He was not surprised by me, she said. He was surprised too early. Grandma Brooks frowned softly, understanding a second later. If Marvin had truly been caught off guard by a child running toward the car, he would have reacted to the child first. But Nia remembered his body changing before her words landed, as if he had already been bracing for a moment he expected. Ruiz wrote one sentence in careful block letters. Driver may have been monitoring approach timing, not cause. The phrase sat on the page like a door opening inward. Elias crossed the room and stopped near the table. He asked Ruiz what that meant in plain English. She answered without drama. It means the person under the car may not have needed the driver to help damage anything. They may have needed him to confirm whether you got in on schedule. The silence that followed felt colder than the suite's air. Elias looked toward the dark window, and in the reflection he saw not a chief executive in control of a tower, but a man whose routine had become a map for someone else. Then Nia added the part no one had asked for yet. She said Marvin had not only checked the mirror. He had touched the screen in the dash, then looked down at the clock, then up again, like he was matching two things. Ruiz's pen stopped. A time check? She asked. Nia nodded. Like when Grandma says the bus is late, and then looks at the microwave and the street at the same time. Grandma Brooks gave the smallest sad smile. Ruiz reached for her phone and stepped 2 paces away to call the officers still working Peachtree and Linden. Her voice stayed low, but Elias heard enough. Secure the vehicle electronics. Pull communication logs from the car system, if available. Recheck Marvin's phone records against the maintenance van entry and the retroactive approval time from the 38th floor terminal. When she returned, the shape of the night had changed again. The sabotage was no longer just access, opportunity, and a hidden hand inside Whitmore Tower. It now had rhythm. Someone inside had opened the gate. Someone outside had gone under the car. And someone behind the wheel may have been there to tell whether the plan was about to succeed or fail. Nia looked at the legal pad, then at Elias, who for the first time seemed to understand that the smallest witness in the room had done more than save his life on the street. She had given the investigators a clock, and once police had a clock, they could start asking who was waiting for which second. Officer Lena Ruiz did not waste a second. She slid the legal pad toward herself, drew a hard line down the page, and wrote 2 columns in neat block letters. On the left she wrote vehicle. On the right she wrote tower. Then she circled the time Marvin had mentioned and looked at Elias with the kind of focus that made even a penthouse suite feel as tight as an interview room. The air conditioner hummed softly above them. Ice shifted in a water glass near the lamp. Nia sat straighter on the couch, her candy bag folded beside her like something from another life. Lena asked the next question gently, but it landed heavy. Had anyone from the 38th floor called down to the motor court or garage around that time? Elias did not answer right away. His jaw tightened. He crossed the room to the window, staring out at buckhead lights smeared across the glass. Then said Dana often handled changes without bothering him. Cars, schedules, visitors, last-minute reroutes. She knew how his days moved before he did. That was when the room changed. Grandma Brooks lowered her hands into her lap. Nia watched Elias turn back, and for the first time she saw not just a rich man under pressure, but a man realizing that access was not the same thing as loyalty. Lena called the detective at Peachtree and Linden and put the phone on speaker for only a moment. The message was short. Pull every call and terminal contact between the 38th floor, the service entrance, and the driver line within a 15-minute window of the sabotage. Then she clicked it off before names could spill into the room. Elias asked whether they had enough for an arrest. Lena said not yet. Enough for pressure, yes. Enough for certainty, no. Nia kept looking at the left column and right column on the pad. Vehicle, tower, 2 hands on one plan. She remembered Marvin glancing into the mirror before she had even reached the sedan. Not surprised. Checking. Waiting. But she also remembered something else now. Something smaller than the patch on the jacket and easier to miss. The driver's side window had been cracked open just a little, though the morning had been cool. She said it quietly. Marvin had the window open a little bit. Elias frowned. Why did that matter? Nia turned toward him, careful and steady. Because if he was waiting for a sound, he would need to hear it. A call. A signal. Maybe somebody tapping on the car. The suite went still. Lena did not praise her. She did something better. She treated the idea as evidence. She wrote window cracked open and underlined it twice. Then she asked Elias whether his cars had hands-free systems that paired automatically. He said yes, but only approved devices. Lena nodded once, already building the bridge in her head. A person in the tower could have signaled a person in the car, or a person near the car could have signaled the driver. Coordinated timing, just like Nia had said, but now with a practical method instead of a suspicion. Elias reached for his phone, then stopped himself and set it face down on the table. That tiny act said more than any speech. For a man who solved most problems by calling someone, silence had become a decision. He looked at Nia. His voice came low and honest. You are seeing things grown people missed, because grown people only notice what they expect. Nia did not smile. She only held tighter to the frayed strap of her candy bag and asked the question no one else had asked yet. If Ms. Dana let the van in, who told the man under the car which one was yours? The answer did not come. But in the soft lamplight, with the columns on the legal pad and the city murmuring far below, the shape of the trap became clearer than it had ever been. This was not just sabotage. It was scheduling, access, and recognition. Someone had not only wanted Elias stopped. Someone had wanted the right car, at the right curb, in the right second. And now the smallest witness in the suite had forced everyone to look at the part of the plan that required an insider who knew exactly how his world moved. Officer Lena Ruiz did not raise her voice when she stepped away from the window and lifted her phone again, but the quiet in the suite changed around her all the same. The city lights beyond the glass looked soft and distant, yet everything inside that room sharpened. Elias Whitmore stood beside the dining table with one hand pressed flat against the legal pad, his jaw set, his expensive coat still on, as if he had not fully accepted that the night had turned from inconvenience into betrayal. Grandma Brooks kept one arm around Nia without pulling her close enough to make the child feel small. Nia sat straight on the sofa, her candy bag folded beside her, watching every adult face the way children do when they understand more than the grown-ups wish they did. Officer Ruiz listened for a few seconds, then said, very clearly, that she wanted every traffic camera image from Peachtree to the garage entrance at Whitmore Tower and every private security feed from businesses facing the curb during the 15-minute window before the car was supposed to leave. She ended the call and turned back to the room with a look that was steadier than comfort and stronger than fear. The cracked window had changed the direction of the case. If Marvin had needed outside sound or a timed signal, then someone had been close enough to communicate without ever stepping into the car. Elias finally looked at Nia, not as a frightened witness, but as the person who had moved the entire investigation forward one detail at a time. He asked her what made her remember the window now and not earlier. Nia answered with the simple honesty that kept stunning him. She said she had been thinking about how cold the air felt when she ran up, and how strange that was because rich people in nice cars usually kept their windows all the way up when the air conditioning was on. Then she added one more thing, softer this time. Marvin had not looked surprised when she shouted. He had looked annoyed, like she had interrupted something he was waiting to hear. That landed harder than any accusation. Officer Ruiz wrote it down at once. The theory was no longer just sabotage near a wheel. Now it was coordination between the driver and someone outside the vehicle, someone who knew exactly when Elias would reach the curb. Elias reached for his phone and made a decision that cost him something visible. He called his chief of staff and ordered the cancellation of the private donor breakfast set for 7:30 the next morning. No exceptions, no substitutions, no confidential arrivals. If the plan depended on routine, then his routine would stop tonight. It was the first time he had publicly disrupted his own machine because of the warning of an 8-year-old girl. While he was still on the line, Officer Ruiz received a return call. One of the nearby cameras had already been checked. A service VIN matching the Northline description had not only passed the block earlier than expected, it had paused in a loading zone across from the tower, long enough for someone to step out, face the curb, and raise a phone toward the street. Not a long call, not a conversation, a signal. Ruiz did not say the word trap, but nobody in the suite needed her to. Nia looked down at her hands and remembered the small bright line under the car again, then looked back up with a new kind of certainty. There had been 2 jobs that afternoon. One person had prepared the car. Another had watched for the exact second to trigger the rest. And somewhere between the tower, the curb, and the driver's seat, somebody still believed their timing had been perfect.